Alvin Kamara will finally see his first career 1,000-yard rushing season this year under Kellen Moore. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we'll continue our deep dive into what the New Orleans Saints offense might look like in 2025 with a pretty clear indication that we're probably not going to see as many two running back sets for the New Orleans Saints in 2025 as we have seen in the recent past. Why and what that means for New Orleans, we'll break that all down. And we're going to continue our position preview as training camp is now officially 1 week away from getting started. Taking a look at the running back position, why Devin Neal might be a rookie but could have an immediate impact, and why Alvin Kamara is going to see his first 1,000-yard rushing season under Kellen Moore. We got that and much more for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. Right now, you can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. Alvin Kamara will see his first 1,000-yard rushing season, finally, of his career under new head coach Kellen Moore. And there's three very simple reasons why. Number one, Kellen Moore loves to run the football. Number two, Alvin Kamara still got it. He was only 50 yards shy last year of a 1,000-yard rushing season under Clint Kubiak. And number three, this is an offense that promises to elevate what it is that players do well by asking them to do the things that they do well. Gasp. What an idea, right? What a novel idea. But that is the way that Kellen Moore runs his offenses. And I think that's going to be of great value to Alvin Kamara in 2025. So let's take a look at each one of those things a little bit more deeply, and then we'll get to some of the other guys that are going to be included in this sort of camp battle behind Alvin Kamara, which is going to be just as entertaining. So number one, as we were discussing, like Kellen Moore loves to run the football. He's put together several positive and successful rushing attacks over the course of his years with the Dallas Cowboys, working with two different types of backs in Ezekiel Elliott and then Tony Pollard. Didn't find as much success with the Los Angeles Chargers, but the Chargers haven't really been able to find an answer to their run game for quite some time outside of some really good Austin Eckler seasons in the past. Kellen Moore did not get the most successful version of Austin Eckler back in 2023. He got a much older version, things like that. So that, of course, was an impact there. But, of course, paved the way for a 2,000-yard rushing season for Saquon Barkley last year. And while Alvin Kamara is not Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara is Alvin Kamara. And so maybe not a 2,000-yard rushing season on the way for Alvin, but a 1,000-yard rushing season is a very easy thing to project for the still young running back. The other thing that I highlighted was that Alvin Kamara was really close. He still got it, is the thing, right? Alvin Kamara added over 500 receiving yards last year to his 950 rushing yard total, 8 total touchdowns, was on fire early on in the season, kept scoring and scoring and scoring against the Dallas Cowboys in the second week. And then everything kind of went kaput over the course of the next 7 weeks, right? The big tailspin there for the Saints. And then Alvin Kamara missed the last few games of the season because of a groin strain, catching a touchdown pass from wide receiver Cedric Wilson. Yes, I said that right. On kind of a double pass situation and everything. And so the last thing that Alvin Kamara did on the football field was score a touchdown. You know what I mean? And so really the only reason why he didn't get his first career 1,000-yard rushing season last year was because of that injury, because he outstretched to catch that pass and then pulled a groin muscle and then was out for the rest of the season, unfortunately, for this team. So I think Alvin Kamara still got it. Kellen Moore loves to be able to lean into that run game. Both of those things go hand in hand. And then finally, Kellen Moore said over and over again that he loves to play to players' superpowers. And so keeping Alvin Kamara in a world in which he's able to take advantage of being utilized in space, running outside the tackles, all those other things, still going to be a big part of what this New Orleans Saints offense does in 2025. Will they run more between the tackles? Yes, absolutely. The Saints ran 69.8% of the time outside of the tackles last year, most in the NFL. But it's part of what effectively started to make the Saints offense a little bit more predictable last season. Now, they still found ways to be impactful in that area, but you were kind of a one-trick pony last year. That's not going to be the case for Kellen Moore's Saints with a far more diverse and eclectic rushing attack. I think that will complement Alvin Kamara even further while still complementing him by putting him out in space and allowing him to do what he does outside of the tackles as well. And really the fourth thing I think that I'll mention too is the idea of having a solid complement. And that gets us into our conversation around the competition around that running back position behind Alvin Kamara. Kendre Miller, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, those are the guys that are coming back. Then the Saints added Velus Jones Jr. as well as Cam Akers in free agency. Then they also went to the rookie class by adding Devin Neal as a rookie drafted out of the 6th round, and then undrafted free agent out of Delaware in Marcus Yarns. I want to start off with the players now that are coming back. Kendre Miller, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They were with the team last year, coming back this year. We'll get to the new faces here in a little bit. And so the next thing that I think makes Alvin Kamara great is having a solid complement so that he's not the only kind of focus in that run game. And so if a Kendre Miller, who really is the guy that no question about his talent, it's just can he stay on the field and can he stay healthy? And if he's able to do that, then I think that helps to elevate Kendre Miller quite a bit because, as we just mentioned, it's a more diverse and eclectic run game. Kendre Miller benefits from that because he's a fantastic inside zone runner, but was a part of a part of an offense that ran just shy of 70% of the time outside the tackles, like we just highlighted, is a plus for Alvin Kamara, kind of a negative for Kendre Miller. And so being able to get Kendre Miller going between the tackles allows you to be able to maximize what it is that Kendre Miller does well. Again, operate to each player's superpower, right? And so we know that that's what they're going to do with Alvin Kamara. They would do the same thing with Kendre Miller, provided that he's on the field. And so if you're able to do that, it elevates Kendre Miller's game, puts him back into a place where he's comfortable. It's what got him drafted at TCU. He's a breakaway speed player, but he typically does it with patience and vision between the tackles, not necessarily trying to catch the edge and win around the corner. He can do that, but he's really effective in between the tackles. That also gives you a good counterpart to Alvin Kamara to be the complement when Alvin Kamara is not on the field. And so I think that having both of those guys can be a major, major contribution to one another and be a major contribution to this New Orleans Saints offense and Kellen Moore's run game. The other thing that I think that you're looking at when it comes to Kendre Miller is continuing to have an impact in the passing game. And he has shown that a little bit, catching some swing passes to the outside and picking up some big yards after catch in those situations, showing a little bit of the breakaway speed in the open field that he does have. Kendre's a really interesting guy because he didn't get to run a 40 coming out of going into the draft process. And so there's no 40-yard dash time for him. And so people just assume that he's not fast, but he is. He's actually ridiculously fast. And so getting him the ball out in space still has its value as well. So it's kind of reminiscent of the boom and zoom days of New Orleans Saints running backs Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Not the same, but I'm talking about play style wise, right? Alvin Kamara was able to be the guy that got outside and caught passes and all those other things, but could also run in between the tackles enough, right? Was it what you wanted him doing 90% of the time? No. But could you do it with him 10% of the time? Absolutely. And that's enough to keep a defense on their toes. Meanwhile, Mark Ingram was able to get outside and catch passes just enough that it created a little bit of a sense of a conundrum for an opposing defense that both players could do just enough of the other things that you had to be true to that, right? You had to be honest to that. Finally, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I think really the thing that would be best for Clyde Edwards-Helaire is to show not only, he can be impactful between the tackles and pick up yards after contact, much like Kendre Miller, but the fact that he can catch passes, the fact that he can win the corner in the outside run game, because then he also not only complements Alvin Kamara, but could potentially spell Alvin Kamara if you need to get him off the field for a couple of plays or a breather or something like that. So I think that for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's really about showing about just as much what you can do like Alvin Kamara as it is showing what you can do to complement Alvin Kamara. And so if both of those guys do those individual things, they're probably on this roster in 2025. Meanwhile, the new faces have a little bit more of an uphill climb, except for drafted rookie Devin Neal, who could absolutely have a rookie impact. Let me tell you why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Go and grab the FanDuel app today or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. This is absolutely a wonderful time to get in over at FanDuel Live, and summer sports are all in full swing. So whether you're rooting for baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or a little bit of high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel's got everything that you need, including my favorite WNBA odds as well. For instance, later on tonight, the Las Vegas Aces traveling to take on the Dallas Wings. The Aces 5.5-point favorites, but maybe you like Paige Beckers and the Wings in the upset. You can go and check that out and much more over at FanDuel today. New daily promotions make it always giving you a bunch of fun ways to bet and much more. Quick, fast, easy payouts as well. So go and check them out today. If you haven't already and you're a new customer, perfect timing. New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Open up the FanDuel app today or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, family. Devin Neal might be a 6th-round draft pick, but make no mistake about it, he can have an immediate impact during his rookie season. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us for another episode. Don't forget that we have the Locked On NFL Top 100 coming out on Locked On Sports today. You can go and find that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and we'll be reacting to some number of New Orleans Saints that make the list this year, including some that got left off that I think actually should have been on the list. So we'll dive into all of that in tomorrow's show. You can go and find the Locked On NFL Top 100 and all of the very interesting and sometimes disappointing results if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, which why would you be, right? While you're watching this show. But anyway, you can find all that over at Locked On Sports today. Make sure you go and check it out. We appreciate you very much for being here with us on Locked On Saints. All right, so the rookie that I think a lot of people are kind of, I don't want to say most excited about, but one of the rookies that people are most excited about is running back Devin Neal. 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Only missed 1 game throughout his entire collegiate career, but it wasn't to injury. It was an opt-out out of the bowl game right before going into the NFL draft. So never missed a game due to injury. So shows you some durability. Averaged just 190 carries over the course of his 4 years over at Kansas, meaning that he still has a lot of tread left on the tires despite being a feature back. That's how explosive he was, to where even though he was only getting an average of 190 carries, he still had those 1,000-yard rushing seasons each of those 3 years, 16 rushing touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. So he did that twice in a row. And then added a little bit of production in the passing game as well. For all those reasons, I think Devin Neal, even though he was a 6th-round draft pick, we're not talking about Devin Neal. We shouldn't be talking about Devin Neal like one of those 6th-round draft picks that may or may not make the roster, that might end up on the practice squad if he's lucky and all those other things. We're talking about Devin Neal effectively being a lock for the roster. And I think that's really intriguing. And I don't think that it's unwarranted either, right? He was handpicked by this coaching staff, which we know is very important in the NFL draft. One of the reasons why we talk about Tyler Shuck, the way that we talk about Tyler Shuck and potentially being the starter at the beginning of the year, all those other things. And so you're not going to waste time here, right? And like, again, Devin Neal, very productive, highly productive, team captain, team leader type, great culture fit for where this team is wanting to be, where they're wanting to go, and is a great fit on the field as well. Can run in between the tackles, can run outside the tackles, brings you to scoring production, great, really good pass blocking back as well. Not the like Travion Henderson of the league, right, in conversation, but still a very solid pass blocker out of the backfield, all of that. And I think that for all those reasons, A, he's going to find his way onto the field during his rookie season, and B, he has the ability to, assuming he can translate that from Kansas and from the collegiate ranks to the NFL, which is a question for every rookie in the league. If he can answer that question, it's going to be tough to keep him off the field. I don't think he's going to usurp Alvin Kamara, but it's going to be very interesting to see what the split number of carries are between the running backs behind Alvin Kamara with Devin Neal versus at the beginning of the season versus what Devin Neal's carries look like versus those other running backs late in the season, right behind Alvin Kamara. So I'm really excited to see Devin Neal and really start to get an opportunity to see all these running backs during training camp. Because remember, Saints didn't do any helmets during walkthroughs. So the only thing that we really saw in terms of run game all throughout OTAs, minicamp, and all that was half-speed walkthroughs. And then they didn't do a single 11-on-11 drill. So we haven't really gotten a look at the run game. And then even still, we're only going to get like a smidgen of a look of the run game during training camp because we're not going to see live tackling and breaking tackles and all those other things. So we really don't know until the preseason. But I got to tell you, Devin Neal in the preseason might be one of the most fun players that we'll see over on the offensive side. So we'll get an opportunity to get a better look at him. But I do think that even though he was a 6th-round draft pick, he absolutely has the ability to have an impact during his rookie year. All right, 3 other new faces. 2 free agency additions, Velus Jones Jr. as well as Cam Akers. and then the undrafted free agent in Marcus Yarns. Let's keep going with the rookies here, and we'll jump to Marcus Yarns. Marcus Yarns, I think, has a really good chance to get to the practice squad. I don't know that he makes the active roster, but if he impresses, expect Kellen Moore to listen, right? I don't know how many running backs the Saints are going to keep on their roster this year. It's interesting. For the first time, we're covering a New Orleans Saints team that doesn't have a fullback. And so does that mean an extra roster spot goes to the backfield still at running back, or do they use that extra roster spot for the edge rushers or for the interior defensive linemen or for, who are going to be in a heavier rotation now with 3 interior D linemen on the field at a time in typical circumstances, all those things. And so where that extra roster spot goes, nobody knows at this point. But if it stays in the backfield, we could see the Saints keep 3, 4, potentially even 5 running backs going into 2025. We don't know just yet, right? Is Taysom Hill on the roster or on an injury list at the beginning of the season? Because if he's on the roster, then he can contribute snaps in the backfield. And if he's healthy, he'll do that right away. And so maybe that impacts the number that you're willing to keep at running back. Like there's a lot of these different things. And so, or a lot of these different variables or factors, whatever you want to call them. And so with Marcus Yarns, probably the most immediate path for him is that to the practice squad, which is a good spot for him. He's got some development to do coming from Delaware to the NFL. It's going to take a little bit of it takes a little bit of a leap. And he's somebody that runs outside well, has good breakaway ability, and can catch passes. He's kind of Alvin Kamara-like in that type of usage, right? He's that kind of scat back, if you will. And so you don't necessarily need that on your roster right now when you have Alvin Kamara, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, potentially even others that could hold that role. And so you can develop him in the background and then see what he turns into over time, much like the Saints were trying to do with guys like Jordan Mims and Xavier Valade and all that over the course of the last year or a couple of years in Jordan Mims's case. So I think that's where we start to see things with Marcus Yarns, but we'll also see what happens when he gets out on the field and what that means for this team, because he could change the conversation very quickly by just being really good. And we won't ever close the book on that before a guy even gets a chance to really hit the field. The other 2 newcomers are veterans. Velus Jones Jr., who's a converted wide receiver to running back, but running back was kind of the position that he played in his childhood and through prep football and all those other things. So him and his experience as a running back is actually going to be pretty good. And then you add to that some receiving capabilities. He's kind of in the same conversation as Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that way. Meanwhile, Cam Akers comes in and is a little bit more in the same conversation as a Kendre Miller as a between the tackles runner. And let me stress for you, a fantastic protector in the backfield, which when you have a young rookie quarterback or a second-year quarterback or just a young quarterback as a whole, or heck, a quarterback at all, right? Having a good backfield protector at running back is a pretty good way to go. Remember, the Saints found a lot of success with that with Mark Ingram and Latavius Murray. Let's not forget about how Latavius Murray contributed that way. There were times where Latavius Murray blocked somebody in the backfield and then stayed alive long enough and allowed the quarterback to stay alive long enough that he could break out to a little route and then catch and run for big yards after catch opportunity. If Cam Akers can bring that and bring you some between the tackles running, some yards after contact type rushes, then I think that's going to be of value as well. So each of those newcomers absolutely has a path to stealing one of these roster spots, or earning rather one of these roster spots. The question is, how many roster spots are going to be dedicated to the position? And so that's going to be the thing that we just kind of have to wait to see. But if the Saints are smart, and Kellen Moore is, you keep the players on your roster that make sense and that have earned the spot. Doesn't matter how many you have at any one position. You just need to make sure that you have the players that are going to make plays. And if all these running backs prove that they can go out there and make plays, the Saints could have the pick of the litter when it comes to how many running backs they want to keep and which ones fill those spots. Coming up next, let's dive into why you're probably not going to see as many 2 running back sets for the New Orleans Saints in 2025 as you saw last year, why that's a problem, but also why it can be okay. We'll look at both sides of the coin as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. You should expect to see far less 2 running back sets in Kellen Moore's New Orleans Saints offense than you saw in Clint Kubiak's New Orleans Saints offense last year. And I want to dive into why that is both a good thing and a not so good thing as well. Let's start off with why it's a good thing. Because part of it is, as we've highlighted over the course of this show so far, there are 7, including Alvin Kamara, pretty talented running backs that the New Orleans Saints could utilize on the field together. And keep in mind that when we talk about those 2 running back sets from last year, that doesn't actually include the times where, Taysom Hill was in the back, because Taysom Hill was designated as a second tight end. So he was so even if you had one of those guys in the backfield, he was often still under that 12 personnel rather than that 21 personnel approach. Remember, first digit number of running backs, second digit number of tight ends. So when we look at 21 personnel for the New Orleans Saints this year, as opposed to last year, just based on what Kellen Moore has done in his past, I think that you should expect to see far fewer of those two running back sets for New Orleans. Now, look, Kellen Moore has changed and reshaped his offenses in the past based upon what talent he has, what that talent does well on the field, what his coaching staff does well, and what matches up well against the opposing defenses, that he's matched up against. And so with that in mind, there's always a little bit of a way that you could see these trends change and bend on a week-to-week basis, let alone a year-to-year basis. But just looking at the numbers so far, the Saints probably are going to see fewer of these two running back sets. The reason why I think that this isn't necessarily a good thing is because while the rest of the NFL is getting heavier, we talked about this in yesterday's episode, if you remember correctly. If you didn't catch it, you can go and check it out. We talked about 12 personnel, the two tight end sets. The NFL is trending towards getting heavier because the offenses have already forced opposing defenses to get lighter by deploying a lot of 3 wide receiver sets and things like that. And so now the ebb and flow chess match of the NFL is now shifting to where offenses are starting to get heavier in order to take advantage of the lighter defenses that they've forced, kind of the hybrid linebacker safety that's become, the trend around the league is now at a disadvantage as more 2 tight end sets and 2 running back sets are deployed, which allows teams typically to run really successfully, right? Those are heavier run formations than they are, or run groupings, personnel groupings, than they are passing groupings. And so I think that this is maybe an example of where Kellen Moore doesn't necessarily go in the same direction that the rest of the NFL is going. So that's what I mean by okay, there's a little bit of conversation here where you might go, maybe the 2 running back sets are actually a good thing and you probably want to keep them. Here's why I don't think you're going to see very many 2 running back sets in 2025. Let's look back at 2024. We saw the New Orleans Saints 16.3% of their offensive snaps came out of 21 personnel, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, 2-1-21 with 2 wide receivers. That was number 4 in the NFL. Now there's some context to that, right? The times where the Saints were down a bunch of wide receivers, they might have deployed these sets a little bit more frequently because they didn't have their top wide receiver talent by week 8 in the season, right? So that might have been a big part of what that was. Meanwhile, though, you look over to the other side of this, the Philadelphia Eagles last year under Kellen Moore, only 1.5% of their offensive snaps, number 19 in the NFL. And I got to tell you, that's a lot of teams that are around that 1 to 1.5%. So this isn't a big departure from 0 for Kellen Moore and the Philadelphia Eagles last year. So even though they were number 19, the key metric here is that they were 1.5% in terms of their 12% or 21 personnel usage. Bear in mind that across the NFL, the league average was 6.2%. So the Eagles and Kellen Moore were just shy of 6 times less than that. So that's why I think you're not going to see a lot of this. And it doesn't happen to be just Kellen Moore and the Philadelphia Eagles that didn't use a lot of 21 personnel. This has been pretty consistent throughout Kellen Moore's career. You look at the 2019 Dallas Cowboys, his career high as a play caller, 8.8%, right? That was his career high in terms of 12 personnel usage, 21 personnel usage. He has never, ever gotten close to that metric again. 0.9% the next year, 2.3 and 2.6% his last 2 years over in Dallas. With the Los Angeles Chargers, 0%, 0 snaps. 1.5 last year with the Philadelphia Eagles. That means that his average usage of 2 running back sets with 1 tight end was just 2.6 over the course of his entire play calling career so far since 2019. So I think that that's the thing that we're looking at when we say I probably wouldn't expect a lot of 2 running back moments for the Philadelphia Eagles, for Kellen Moore based on what he did with the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's take a look at some of the metrics too, right? The Saints ran a lot more than the Eagles, but as we learned with 12 personnel, even though the Saints ran it more than the Eagles did last year slightly, the Eagles are still more efficient in it. That's not necessarily the case here with 21 personnel attributed. So for the Saints, they were not even close to being as efficient as the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles were a lot more efficient in these situations, but still not the most efficient. Philadelphia Eagles, 18th in the NFL in terms of offensive EPA, which remember takes into account things like down and distance, score and clock, all those other things. The Saints, number 30 in the NFL in terms of total offensive EPA out of 21 personnel. Let's look at the passing game. The Saints, much more proficient in that area. The Saints were number 7 in the NFL in passing out of 21 personnel, which they did do a lot. You might not expect that, right? This is a very run-heavy personnel group. The Eagles, 22nd in terms of passing efficiency out of that personnel group. But the Eagles, much more efficient in the run game, but still just below the bottom part of the middle of the pack, 18th in the league, while the Saints were 31st, basically second worst in the league, running out of 2 running back sets. So when the Saints do, under Kellen Moore, go into those running back sets, expect them to run the ball more efficiently than they did last year. But we'll see if maybe they keep some of the passing offense stuff that helped them out a ton last year out of that formation, out of that personnel group. But I would expect to see the Saints operating a lot out of 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, and then 1 running back, 2 tight ends, and 2 wide receivers. I would expect that that's where we're going to see this team go. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, we're reacting to the Locked On NFL Top 100, which drops later on today. Actually, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can head over to Locked On Sports today and catch that episode now, released at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Make sure you go and check that out today. We appreciate you very much. As always, make this a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.